She married a human to stop a war, only to uncover why his species is forbidden. He stood alone at the center of the conquered hall, surrounded by delegates whose bodies shimmered, floated, clicked, or bent light itself. Against them the human looked painfully ordinary. 2 arms, 2 legs, soft skin, no natural armor, no visible weapons. His clothes were plain, dark, and respectful without symbols of rank or power, and yet no one moved closer to him. Lureth felt it immediately, the space people left around the human like an invisible wall, not fear exactly, something quieter, older. The chamber was silent longer than protocol allowed. Systems hummed, translation fields waited. Finally, the human inclined his head slightly, a small motion that somehow felt deliberate. "My name is Elias Ward," he said calmly. "I speak for Earth." The words passed through the translators, but the reaction did not. Several elder delegates stiffened. One of the crystalline ministers dimmed its light. A being of pure sound lowered its frequency, as if trying not to be heard. Lureth swallowed. Earth, the forbidden system. She had studied interstellar politics her entire adult cycle. She knew every restricted zone, every sealed archive, every classified species. Humans were always there, but never explained. Their name appeared in footnotes without detail. Treaties referenced them without context. Warnings existed without reasons. Now one stood in front of them, breathing quietly, waiting. The Speaker of the Council finally broke the silence. "The conquered acknowledges Earth's presence," the Speaker said, voice neutral. "State your purpose." Elias did not raise his voice. He did not bow, he simply answered. "We are here because your expansion fleets crossed our borders," he said, "and because every automated response we sent was ignored." A ripple passed through the chamber. "That region is unclaimed," a delegate argued quickly. "It was unmarked," Elias corrected. "Not uninhabited." Lureth watched him closely. Humans were said to be emotional, unstable, dangerous. Yet his tone was steady. His face showed no anger, only something firm beneath the calm. The Speaker adjusted its stance. "Conflict benefits no one. The Council seeks resolution." "So do we," Elias replied. "That is why I am here instead of our Defense Council." That statement landed harder than a threat. Lureth realized then why she had been summoned to this session. She was not a general. She was not a weapons expert. She was a diplomat, a negotiator. And now she understood with cold clarity she was a solution. The session ended without conclusion. It could not end otherwise. Protocol demanded delay, consultation, silence. As the delegates began to disperse, Lureth felt the signal on her neural band, a private summons. High priority, council authority. She followed the direction to a sealed chamber beneath the hall, her thoughts racing. Inside, the air felt heavier, older. The kind of room where decisions were not debated, only accepted. The Speaker waited, accompanied by 3 elders whose species had signed the oldest surviving treaties. "You know why you are here," the Speaker said. Lureth did not pretend otherwise. "Because no one else wants to be." "That is one reason," the Speaker replied. An elder spoke, its voice layered with time. "The human presence cannot be allowed to escalate, nor can it be erased." "Why?" Lureth asked carefully. "Why are they forbidden?" Every record avoids the answer. The elders exchanged something that was not quite a glance. "You do not need to know why," the Speaker said. "You need to prevent war." Lureth's frills tightened in frustration. "With respect, Speaker, ignorance is not a tool. It is a weakness." Silence followed. Then slowly the Speaker said, "There is one path remaining." Lureth already knew what it was. "Interspecies marriage," the elder confirmed. "Binding, recognized by all signatories. A personal alliance that supersedes territorial dispute." Lureth closed her eyes for a brief moment. Marriage was not unheard of in diplomacy. Rare, yes. Difficult, yes, but effective. "What about the human?" she asked. "Will he agree?" The Speaker paused. "He already has." That made her open her eyes. "You spoke to him without informing me." We informed him of the cost of refusal, the elder said quietly. Lureth felt a flicker of anger not toward Elias but toward the council. Still, she steadied herself. When? She asked. Tomorrow, the speaker replied. Before panic spreads. The weight of the galaxy settled on her shoulders. She left the chamber and walked slowly through the quiet corridors of the Concord. Her reflection followed her in the polished walls, tall, elegant, marked by years of careful diplomacy. She had ended conflicts before, she had never married one. The human quarters were modest, security minimal. That alone was strange. When the door opened, Elias stood there as if he had been waiting at that exact distance. Ambassador Lureth, he said, thank you for coming. You knew I would, she replied. Yes, he said simply. They sat across from each other. No guards, no devices visible. You agreed very quickly, she said. Elias folded his hands. My species has learned that delays often cost more than decisions. That sounds like experience, Lureth said. It is, he replied. She studied him openly now. He did not resist the gaze. His eyes were dark, reflective, holding a depth that did not match his appearance. You know almost nothing about me, she said. I know enough, he answered. You argued for dialogue during the closed session, even when others wanted containment. Lureth was surprised. You had access to that. No, Elias said, but I listened to how the room reacted when you spoke. She tilted her head slightly. You read the silence. He smiled faintly. Humans are good at that. A pause settled between them, not uncomfortable, measured. Why is your species forbidden? She asked at last. Elias did not answer immediately. Instead, he stood and walked to the viewport. Beyond it, stars drifted in slow, endless motion. We were told the galaxy was not ready, he said quietly, so we waited. For how long? Lureth asked. He turned back to her. Longer than anyone remembers. Something in his voice made her uneasy, not fear but respect. The ceremony was small, too small for its importance. Many seats were empty. Several elder species refused to attend. Their absence spoke louder than protest. As Lureth and Elias stood side by side, the binding protocols activated. Ancient systems stirred, recognizing a union that transcended politics. Lureth felt a subtle shift, like a lock turning somewhere far away. Across the chamber, an archival console flickered. Without warning, entire data branches sealed themselves. Restricted, restricted, restricted. The word repeated until the system went dark. No alarm sounded. No one acknowledged it, but Lureth saw Elias notice. Their eyes met briefly. He did not look surprised. As the final declaration was spoken, the speaker announced the end of hostilities. Trade routes reopened, fleets withdrew, sanctions dissolved as if they had never existed. The war ended before it began. Relief filled the chamber, but beneath it something else lingered. Lureth felt it clearly now. This was not victory, it was avoidance. Later, in the quiet of their shared quarters, Lureth stood alone, processing everything that had happened in less than a cycle. The galaxy was safe, yet nothing felt settled. Behind her, Elias spoke softly. You're wondering what you just agreed to. Yes, she admitted. He did not approach her, he gave her space. So am I, he said. She turned to face him. You knew more than you said. Yes. You still do. Yes. Will you tell me? Elias considered her for a long moment. Then he said, not yet. Because once you know, you will never see the galaxy the same way again. Lureth felt a chill, not of fear but of anticipation. Outside, the stars watched in silence. And somewhere, in archives sealed by choice rather than force, humanity waited, still patient, still forbidden. The days after the marriage passed quietly on the surface, but beneath that calm, Lureth felt the galaxy shifting. The conquered station continued as if nothing unusual had happened. Trade delegates argued over tariffs. Navigation guilds filed routine complaints. Cultural envoys exchanged carefully practiced smiles. Official records listed the human situation as resolved, settled, complete. Yet every time Lureth walked through the halls, she felt eyes on her. Not hostile, not curious, careful. She had become something new, not just an ambassador, a variable. Elias noticed it too. They shared quarters now as protocol demanded, though the space between them remained respectful and measured. They spoke often but rarely about the same things. Lureth asked about Earth's ecosystems, its cities, its art. Elias answered willingly, describing oceans that covered most of the planet, skies that changed color with weather, and cultures that differed wildly yet shared common stories. But when she asked about history beyond the public record, he gently redirected the conversation. And when Elias asked questions, they were never simple. He asked about the oldest council members, about sealed migration paths, about why certain star systems were charted but never visited. "You know those are restricted topics," Lureth told him once. "Yes," Elias replied calmly, "that's why I'm asking." She studied him more closely each day. Humans, she learned, were observant in a quiet way. Elias noticed patterns others ignored. He remembered names, gestures, changes in tone. He listened more than he spoke. One cycle, Lureth received an invitation she had not expected, a private audience with the speaker. She prepared carefully, choosing formal attire and rehearsing neutral responses. Elias did not accompany her. The invitation had specified her alone. The chamber was dimmer than before. Only the speaker waited this time. "You are adjusting well," the speaker said. "That depends on your definition," Lureth replied. The speaker's voice shifted slightly. "The human has not caused disturbance." "He has caused questions," Lureth said. "Yes," the speaker agreed. "Questions are acceptable. Actions are not." Lureth straightened. "You ended a potential war by binding two individuals together and expect there to be no consequences." The speaker was silent for a moment. "Consequences are preferable to extinction." That word landed heavily. "Extinction of whom?" Lureth asked. The speaker did not answer. Instead, it said, "You are now linked to humanity by treaty older than the Council itself. This grants you certain access." A console rose from the floor, its surface shimmering with restricted authorization symbols. "Limited access," the speaker clarified. "Do not test its boundaries." Lureth approached slowly. When she placed her hand on the console, it recognized her instantly, not as a Keller, but as something else. The interface shifted. Categories appeared that she had never seen before: observer species, custodial species, deferred species, and one marked simply as prohibited, self-restricted. "Human," her breath caught. "Self-restricted," she repeated. "Yes," the speaker said, "that distinction matters." "Why?" Lureth asked. "Because it means they chose their limitation," the speaker replied. "We did not impose it." Lureth turned away from the console. "You feared them." The speaker did not deny it. "We respected them." That answer disturbed her more than fear would have. When she returned to the quarters, Elias was seated near the viewport, reading from a thin physical book. The object itself was unusual. "You use printed text?" she asked. "Yes," he said. "It cannot be altered remotely." She paused. "You expected alteration." "Humans tend to plan for worst cases," he replied. She moved closer, then stopped. "I was given partial access today," she said. Elias looked up, his expression attentive but guarded. "You learned about the classification," he said. "Yes." He waited. "Why would a species restrict itself?" she asked. Elias closed the book gently and set it aside. "Because unrestricted growth almost destroyed us once," he said. Lureth felt a chill. "Destroyed you?" "Not physically," Elias said. "Socially, ethically. We learned very early that intelligence does not come with wisdom." She sat across from him. "So you slowed yourselves down." "We hid," he corrected. "We focused inward, on culture, on restraint, on rules that could survive even when memory did not." Lureth considered that. "Other species would see that as weakness." "Yes," Elias agreed. "That is why it worked." As days passed, subtle changes became impossible to ignore. Lureth noticed that council systems responded differently when Elias was present, not malfunctioning, adjusting. Predictive models showed higher confidence margins. Long-term simulations stabilized. Risk assessments shifted from catastrophic to manageable. It was as if the systems recognized something. She also noticed that certain delegates avoided Elias completely, while others watched him with a mix of curiosity and unease. One elder, a being whose species had outlasted 3 galactic cycles, finally spoke to her privately. "You are bonded to a quiet storm," the elder said. "What does that mean?" Lureth asked. "It means the galaxy remembers what your partner does not yet claim to," the elder replied. That same cycle, Lureth discovered something unsettling. She had attempted to access a historical record about early interstellar collapse events. Normally, such requests were denied without explanation. This time the system hesitated. Then it asked a question. Confirm shared custodial authority. Lureth stared at the display. She had not requested that level of access. Slowly, she confirmed. The archive opened. What she saw was not weapons, not battles, not conquest. It was coordination. Ancient star maps adjusted in real time. Resource flows optimized across systems. Population migrations guided gently, not forced. And at the center of it all, a symbol she now recognized. Human. "They organized this," she whispered later, showing Elias a fragment of what she had seen. "Yes," he said quietly, "you govern the galaxy." "No," Elias corrected. "We prevented it from tearing itself apart while others learned how not to." Lureth's voice trembled. "Why leave?" "Because when guidance turns into dependence, collapse becomes inevitable," Elias said. "We stepped back before we became necessary." She struggled to understand. "And the others forgot." "They chose to," Elias said. "It was easier to label us dangerous than to admit reliance." That night, Lureth did not sleep. She stood at the viewport, watching the stars, feeling smaller and larger at the same time. She had thought humanity was forbidden because it was violent. Instead, it was forbidden because it reminded the galaxy of its own fragility. The next council session was tense, though no one spoke openly of it. New proposals were introduced: oversight committees, joint research groups, ethical councils. Many of them listed humans as optional participants. Optional. Elias noticed the phrasing immediately. "They are testing the water," he said to Lureth afterward. "For what?" she asked. "To see if we will refuse," he replied, "or if we will accept responsibility again." "What will you do?" she asked. Elias looked at her, truly looked, as if measuring something unseen. "We will do what we always do," he said, "offer help without control. And if they reject it, then we wait," he said. "We are very good at that." Lureth realized then that patience was not passive, it was deliberate. Later that cycle, an automated message arrived from a system near the galactic edge. Environmental instability, star output fluctuations, long-term survival projections declining. The Council flagged it as low priority, too distant, too complex, too costly. Elias read the report quietly. "That system will fail in 2 centuries," he said. "The analysts had estimated 4. "How do you know?" Lureth asked. "We've seen similar patterns," he replied. "Many times." "What would you do?" she asked. Elias paused. "We would send teachers, not engineers, planners, not enforcers. And if they refuse help, then we document everything," he said, "so someone else can learn later." Lureth felt something shift inside her. For the first time, she understood why the galaxy was afraid. Not because humans would take control, but because they would accept responsibility no one else wanted. As she looked at her husband, this quiet, unassuming human, she realized the truth was far more unsettling than any myth. Humanity did not need the galaxy. The galaxy needed humanity, and it had no idea how close it was to remembering that fact. Outside, the stars continued their slow, silent motion, watching, waiting. The archive did not open all at once. Lureth noticed that first. Each time she returned to it, more appeared, as if the system was measuring her before deciding what she was allowed to see. The access felt less like permission and more like trust being tested. Elias never touched the console himself. "I could," he said once when she asked. "But it matters that you do." That answer stayed with her. The information she uncovered was not dramatic, no stories of wars or heroes. Instead, it was filled with plans, warnings, and long-term models that stretched across centuries. It showed civilizations rising, stabilizing, then slowly losing direction. And in every cycle, a familiar pattern appeared. When species competed, collapse followed. When they cooperated, growth slowed but endured. And at key points, when everything threatened to fall apart, humanity appeared quietly in the records, not as rulers but as advisors. Then, just as quietly, they vanished. Lureth closed the archive one cycle feeling more unsettled than ever. She found Elias in their quarters, seated on the floor, working with simple tools. Thin metal pieces were arranged carefully in front of him. "What is that?" she asked. "A mechanical puzzle," he said. "Old human design." "It seems inefficient," she said. He smiled slightly. "That's the point. It forces patience." She sat beside him. "The archives are opening further," he nodded. "I expected they would." "They respond to context, not commands," she said, "almost as if they are alive." "They were designed to outlast memory," Elias replied. "That requires adaptability," Lureth hesitated. "They are preparing something." "Yes," Elias said. "For what?" she asked. "For the moment when the galaxy asks the wrong question," he said calmly. She did not like how certain he sounded. That moment arrived sooner than expected. A delegation from the Viewership coalition requested a formal audience. The Viewership were known for efficiency and ambition. Their expansion models were aggressive but carefully framed as optimization. They did not ask to meet Elias directly. They asked to meet Lureth. The meeting chamber was public, filled with observers and translators. Transparency was the Viewership's way. "Ambassador," the Viewership representative said, its voice smooth and layered, "your recent alliance has stabilized key regions." "That was the intention," Lureth replied. "We wish to ensure that stability continues," the representative said, "through cooperation." "Define cooperation," Lureth said. The Viewership projected data into the air, star charts, population curves, resource flows. "We propose shared oversight," the representative said. "Human strategic modeling combined with council authority." Lureth felt the trap immediately. "You wish to place humanity in an advisory role," she said, "under your direction." "Guidance requires structure," the Viewership replied. "Without it, influence becomes unpredictable." Lureth thought of Elias' words, "Offer help without control." "I will relay your proposal," she said carefully. The representative tilted its head. "We would prefer a prompt response." Lureth returned to the quarters with a heaviness she could not shake. "They want to use you," she told Elias. He did not seem surprised. "Yes." "They frame it as cooperation," she said, "but it is ownership." "Yes," he agreed again. "Why are you so calm?" she asked. Elias looked at her. "Because this has happened before." "And?" she pressed. "And it always ends the same way," he said. "They either accept limits or they learn why limits exist." That answer troubled her deeply. Before she could respond, an alert sounded through the station. Not an alarm, a notification. A system had requested humanitarian guidance. Not through the council, directly. Lureth stared at the display. "How is that possible?" Elias stood. "Because someone remembered an old protocol." The request came from a mid-tier civilization experiencing slow ecological failure. Their atmosphere was thinning, their oceans warming, their population divided on response. "They are asking for solutions," Lureth said. "They are asking for reassurance," Elias corrected, "that they still have time." The council convened in emergency session. This time Elias was invited. The chamber felt different with him present, not tense, focused. "The request bypassed council authority," one delegate objected. This is unacceptable. It bypassed fear, Elias said calmly, not authority. The speaker addressed him directly. If humanity responds, precedent will be set. Yes, Elias agreed. That is how precedent works. And if others demand the same, the speaker asked. Elias paused. Then we will teach them how to ask for help without surrendering autonomy. Lureth watched the room shift. Not toward anger, toward uncertainty. The council voted. Narrowly, humanity was permitted to respond. As observers, advisors only. No enforcement, no mandates. The response was simple. A team of humans arrived in the affected system. They did not bring advanced technology. They brought models, education frameworks, and long-term planning tools. They trained local scientists, listened to cultural leaders, adapted solutions to fit existing values. Progress was slow, but it was real. Within cycles, environmental decline stabilized. Hope returned. Other systems noticed. Requests began to arrive, quietly at first, then openly. The council tried to manage them, to filter, delay, prioritize. The archive opened further. Lureth accessed a sealed section marked with a warning she had never seen before, not restricted. Caution advised. Inside, she found simulations of futures that had never occurred. Most ended in collapse. A few did not. In every surviving scenario, humanity played the same role. Not leaders, not saviors. Witnesses who refused to abandon responsibility. She closed the archive with trembling hands. You were never forbidden because you were dangerous, she told Elias later. You were forbidden because you made others uncomfortable with their own choices. Elias nodded. Accountability often feels like threat. That cycle the Orcs coalition acted. They presented a motion to formalize human advisory roles under council oversight, mandatory participation, centralized authority. The vote was scheduled quickly, too quickly. Lureth spoke against it. You are repeating an old mistake. Or correcting one, the Orcs representative replied. Elias was silent during the debate. When the speaker asked him to speak, the chamber stilled. Humanity will not accept enforced authority, Elias said simply. And if the council insists, the speaker asked. Elias met its gaze. Then we will step back again. Gasps rippled through the chamber. You would abandon the galaxy, a delegate asked. No, Elias said gently. We would respect its choice. Lureth felt a surge of emotion she struggled to contain. You would let them fail, another voice accused. Elias shook his head. Failure is a teacher. We do not deny lessons. The vote failed, barely. The motion was rejected, but the damage was done. Fear resurfaced. Whispers spread. Humanity was patient. Humanity was watching. Humanity was waiting. That night, Lureth confronted Elias. You cannot disappear again, she said. Not now. Elias looked at her with something like sadness. We will not disappear unless forced. And if the galaxy pushes you, she asked. Then it will learn something, he said quietly. She stepped closer. What? That restraint is not weakness, Elias said. It is a choice. Lureth realized then that the forbidden truth was not about power. It was about maturity. Humanity had reached a stage the rest of the galaxy had not. And now, slowly, painfully, the galaxy was being asked to grow up. Outside, new requests continued to arrive. The stars did not change, but the way they were seen did. The waiting was ending. And something ancient, patient, and deeply human was preparing to decide whether this time the galaxy was finally ready. Lureth felt it in the way conversation stopped when she entered a room. In the way council members spoke more carefully, choosing words that sounded reasonable but carried fear beneath them. The galaxy was no longer asking whether humanity could help. It was asking whether humanity should be allowed to. Requests for human guidance continued to grow. Some systems asked openly. Others sent messages through unofficial channels, hoping to avoid notice. Each request followed the same pattern, a slow problem, a long future, no clear solution. And each time humans responded the same way. They listened. They taught. They left the final decisions to the people who would live with them. That frightened the council more than control ever had. Because it worked. Lureth sat in the council chamber during another extended session, watching projections scroll endlessly through the air. Models showed stabilizing regions, improved cooperation, reduced long-term risk. The data was clear, but so was the resistance. This trend is unsustainable, one delegate insisted. Human influence is spreading without oversight. Influence is not authority, Lureth replied calmly. No one is being forced. Not yet, the delegate answered. Lureth realized then what they truly feared, not takeover, not rebellion, comparison. Civilizations receiving human guidance were beginning to ask hard questions of their own leaders, about long-term planning, about shared responsibility, about why certain crises had been allowed to grow. The council had maintained order for ages by managing emergencies. Humans were removing the emergencies. Elias stood beside her, silent as always in these sessions. He did not argue unless asked. He did not defend humanity aggressively. He simply waited. That patience was becoming unbearable for some. The breaking point came with a proposal disguised as protection. A new framework was introduced, the Stability Accord. It required all non-council advisory species to register, submit predictive models for approval, and limit contact to council-approved zones. It was presented as balance. Lureth saw it for what it was, a leash. If this passes, she said quietly to Elias later, they will cage you in procedure until you are useless. Elias nodded. Yes. And then blame you for failing, she added. Yes. She stopped walking and faced him. Why are you letting this happen? Elias looked at her, truly looked at her as if weighing not politics but trust. Because this is the moment that decides whether we stay, he said. Lureth felt her chest tighten. You would leave again. We would withdraw, Elias said gently. Not in anger, not in protest, simply away. And let everything collapse, she asked. Elias shook his head. Collapse will not be immediate. It never is. That is why lessons are rarely learned. The Stability Accord came to a vote faster than expected. Support was strong. Fear had unified unlikely allies. Species that once argued constantly now agreed on one thing: humanity needed limits. Lureth requested the floor. She spoke not as a diplomat but as a witness. You are afraid because you are being shown a mirror, she said. Humans are not judging you. They are reminding you that survival does not have to mean control. Murmurs spread, but resistance held. Then Elias was invited to speak. The chamber fell silent. If this accord passes, Elias said calmly, humanity will comply. Relief flickered across several faces. But compliance will mean withdrawal, he continued. We will not operate under systems that prioritize authority over outcomes. Outrage followed immediately. You would abandon those who depend on you, a delegate accused. Elias met the accusation without flinching. Dependence is what we avoid creating. You claim moral superiority, another said. No, Elias replied. We claim responsibility for our own limits. The vote passed. By a narrow margin. The Stability Accord was approved. Lureth felt something break, not loudly but cleanly. That cycle, Elias informed the Council of Humanity's decision. All advisory teams would conclude their current work. No new requests would be accepted. Data and tools already shared would remain. Humans would not interfere further. The reaction was mixed. Some were relieved, others panicked. A few did not believe him. Within cycles, the effects began to show. Projects slowed, coordination weakened, disagreements returned. Not catastrophically, but steadily. The council told itself it had regained control. Lureth watched the galaxy begin to wobble. She confronted the speaker privately. You are undoing centuries of progress, she said. We are preserving sovereignty, the speaker replied. At the cost of survival, Lureth shot back. The speaker was silent for a long moment. You are too close to this. Yes, Lureth said. That is why I can see it clearly. She returned to the quarters to find Elias preparing to leave. Not physically, humans did not flee dramatically, but in the quiet way of ending commitments. "You're really doing it," she said. "Yes," he replied. "You don't want to," she said. "No," Elias agreed. "But wanting is not the same as choosing." She stepped closer. "What if they realize their mistake too late?" Elias looked at her with a sadness that felt older than the stars. "Then we will be what we have always been." "What?" she asked. "A reminder," he said, "not a solution." That night, Lureth accessed the archive one final time. It opened fully, not because she demanded it, because she had decided. She saw the futures now with painful clarity, the slow failures, the near recoveries, the narrow paths where cooperation barely held, and one future, fragile, uncertain, where the council changed its mind. It was not perfect, but it endured. She closed the archive and made her choice. At the next council session, Lureth did something no one expected. She resigned. Gasps echoed through the chamber. "I cannot represent a system that chooses control over responsibility," she said. "Nor can I remain silent while fear dismantles hope." "You are bound by treaty," a delegate protested. "Yes," Lureth replied, "to humanity." She turned to Elias, who stood at the edge of the chamber, prepared to leave. "I stand with them," she said. "Not because they are powerful, but because they are willing to walk away rather than rule." The chamber erupted in chaos, but something else happened too. A smaller system stood, then another, then another. They did not shout, they did not threaten. They requested reconsideration. The vote was called again. This time the stability accord failed. The margin was small, but it was enough. The leash was removed. Humanity did not return immediately. Elias insisted on waiting. "Trust must be proven," he said. Lureth understood. Weeks passed, then months. Requests resumed, but differently now. They came with humility, with questions instead of demands, with acceptance of limits. Human teams returned slowly, carefully, not everywhere, only where invited properly. The galaxy did not change overnight. But it began to learn. One cycle later, Lureth and Elias stood together at the viewport, watching ships move along newly reopened routes. "You almost left," she said quietly. "Yes," Elias replied. "Do you regret staying?" she asked. He looked at the stars. "No. Because this time we were asked to stay." Lureth understood then the final truth. Humanity was never forbidden because it was dangerous. It was forbidden because it forced the galaxy to choose. And for the first time in its long history, the galaxy had chosen growth over fear. Outside, the stars continued their slow motion. But now, they no longer felt like they were waiting. They felt like they were beginning. The galaxy did not celebrate when the final vote failed. There were no grand announcements, no declarations of a new era. No one wanted to admit how close everything had come to breaking apart. Instead, life continued in small, careful steps, as if everyone was afraid that moving too quickly might undo the fragile progress they had made. For Lureth, the change was immediate and personal. She was no longer an ambassador. Her resignation had been accepted without ceremony. Her authority badges were deactivated. Her access was limited to what her treaty with humanity allowed. Many doors closed to her, but others opened. Systems that had never spoken directly to the council began reaching out to her instead. Not for power, not for favors, for understanding. She and Elias relocated from the central conquered halls to a quieter station at the edge of shared space. It was not remote, but it was intentionally modest. No grand chambers, no symbolic architecture, just functional corridors and wide viewports that looked out on unclaimed stars. Humans preferred places like this. "So this is it," Lureth said one cycle, standing beside Elias as cargo drones moved quietly outside. "No titles, no influence." Elias smiled faintly. "Influence is strongest when it is not announced." They spent their days differently now. Elias coordinated small human teams as they returned to advisory roles. Not everywhere, only where requests came freely without conditions. Lureth became something new, not a diplomat, a bridge. She translated not just language but intent. She explained to other species how humans worked, why they refused certain requests, why they insisted on long timelines and shared responsibility. She also explained the galaxy to humans. They are afraid of losing control, she told Elias once. Not because they are cruel, but because control is all they have ever known. Elias nodded. Fear is easier to manage than uncertainty. The difference now was that uncertainty was being faced instead of avoided. Over time, the results became impossible to ignore. Systems that accepted human guidance did not become dependent. They became capable. They stopped requesting constant intervention. They built their own frameworks for cooperation. Other systems noticed and copied. The council slowly changed as well. Not through force, but through embarrassment. Their predictions were increasingly less accurate than those made collaboratively with human-advised systems. Their emergency responses arrived later. Their solutions solved symptoms, not causes. No one said it out loud. But the truth spread. Humanity was not leading the galaxy. It was teaching it how to lead itself. One cycle, Lureth received a message marked with the highest priority. It came from the speaker, a request, not a summons. She read it twice before speaking. They want you to return, Elias said, already understanding. They want us, Lureth corrected. Elias considered that. On what terms? Lureth let out a slow breath. No binding authority, no oversight committees, advisory presence only. Council members must participate as equals in long-term planning. Elias raised an eyebrow. They are learning. Slowly, Lureth said. They did not accept immediately. That was important. Instead, Elias sent a response requesting a waiting period, time for reflection. Time for the council to prove that desperation was not guiding the request. Some delegates protested. Others waited. That alone was progress. During the waiting period, something unexpected happened. A system that had once voted strongly for the Stability Accord reached out publicly to apologize. Not formally, not diplomatically, personally. They admitted fear. They admitted mistakes. They asked for guidance, not just on infrastructure or ecology, but on trust. Elias accepted. Not as a representative of humanity, as a fellow civilization. When the waiting period ended, humanity returned to the conquered, not as envoys but as participants. The difference was subtle but profound. Human seats were not elevated. Their voices were not given priority. They spoke less than most, but when they did speak, the room listened. Lureth stood beside Elias during one such session, watching the speaker address the assembly. "We have long believed stability required control," the speaker said. "We now understand that it requires courage." No one argued. That was how Lureth knew the change was real. The old archives were unsealed gradually with care. Humanity did not demand access. The council did not hide it. Together they reviewed history not to assign blame but to understand patterns. Mistakes were acknowledged. Lessons were documented. The word forbidden quietly disappeared from classification systems. Not replaced, simply removed. One cycle later, a young delegate asked a question during a public forum. Why were humans ever forbidden? The room grew still. Lureth watched Elias closely. He did not hesitate. "We were not forbidden," he said. "We were avoided." "Why?" the delegate pressed. Elias thought for a moment. "Because we remind others that power does not excuse responsibility, and that survival without growth is just a longer failure." The answer spread quickly, not as doctrine, as reflection. Years passed. The galaxy did not become peaceful. Conflict still existed. Disagreements still arose. Mistakes were still made. But collapses became rarer. Recoveries became faster. And cooperation became a habit instead of an exception. Humanity never claimed credit. That perhaps was its greatest contribution. Lureth and Elias aged differently. She noticed it first. Elias changed slowly, subtly. Humans did not display time the same way her species did. "You will outlive me," she said one day without bitterness. "Yes," Elias replied gently. "Does that bother you?" she asked. "It reminds me to be careful with what I help build," he said. "I will have to live with it longer." She smiled at that. In her later cycles, Lureth became a teacher, not formally. She spoke to young diplomats, new leaders, curious thinkers. She told them stories, not of wars, but of choices, of a galaxy that almost chose fear and a species that refused to rule even when it could. When Lureth passed, the galaxy paused, not officially, but everywhere systems marked the moment. Elias stood alone at the viewport of the same quiet station they had once shared. The stars looked the same, but he knew better. The galaxy had changed. Humanity was no longer forbidden, not because it was accepted, but because it was no longer needed as a secret safeguard. The others had learned, slowly, imperfectly, enough. Elias sent a final message to Earth. "We can keep walking with them," he said, "not ahead, not behind, beside." The response was simple. "We always planned to." Far from the conquered, in systems still young and uncertain, civilizations planned futures they believed they would live to see. And for the first time in a very long history, the galaxy was not waiting for someone to save it. It was learning how to endure. And that was why humanity had been forbidden. Because once you learn how to endure, you never need gods again.